قال تعالى: فمن يكفر بالطاغوت ويؤمن بالله فقد استمسك بالعروة الوثقى. فلا بد من الكفر بهذا الطاغوت. وأعرف المعروف أن تأمر الناس بلا إله إلا الله وتقاتل عليها، كما روي هذا في الأثر عن السلف رضي الله عنهم.
Dear Sheikh, why were the strikes against the Americans delayed? Will they be executed soon? And what will our role be? There seemed to be no end to the questions asked by recruits in al-Qaeda's training camps. During June and July of 2000, the question of why bin Laden had delayed the martyrdom operation on the Americans was asked on at least 3 different occasions. We do not know bin Laden's answer. We know that an al-Qaeda cell in Yemen had already tried and failed to attack a U.S. warship, the USS Sullivan's, on January 3rd of 2000. It was going to be al-Qaeda's second operation against the Americans and the first major attack on American targets on the Arabian Peninsula. It is quite likely that bin Laden had hinted to eager followers in Afghanistan that something big was in the making. We would certainly do this later. It is no secret that we are planning to strike America and NATO, he boasted in June of 2001, less than 3 months before the 9/11 attacks. The suicide operation against the USS Sullivan failed for rather mundane reasons. The operatives miscalculated the tide, and the boat loaded with explosives got stuck in the sand. But the blunder passed in silence as the boat sank to the bottom. The al-Qaeda cell was able to recover the boat, and on January 3rd of 2001, they made a second attempt at the USS Cole, which at that time was anchored in the port of Aden. This time, they succeeded. The explosion ripped a large hole in the ship's hull and killed 17 U.S. sailors. More importantly, the attack caused the U.S. Navy to stop refueling in the port of Aden. It seemed that al-Qaeda's strategy of attacking U.S. targets abroad was starting to work. The USS Cole operation was carried out by a network of Saudi and Yemeni operatives led by Abd al-Rahim al-Nashiri. Al-Nashiri was a veteran jihadist who was radicalized in the early 1990s and fought in Tajikistan, Chechnya, and Afghanistan. He was a cousin of Azam, the suicide bomber who carried out the attack on the U.S. Embassy in Nairobi. Al-Nashiri claims he joined al-Qaeda in 1998 after Azam was killed. Bin Laden subsequently tasked him to carry out terrorist attacks on the Arabian Peninsula. Nashiri planned the failed attack on the USS Sullivan's in January 2000, the attack on the USS Cole in October 2000, and the attack on a French oil tanker, the MV Limburg, in 2002, in addition to several plots that never materialized. The Yemeni al-Qaeda member Walid bin Attash, aka Khalad, was initially an important part of al-Nashiri's network. Bin Attash was radicalized in the first half of the 1990s, trained in Afghanistan, and attempted to join the jihad in Tajikistan. He joined al-Qaeda in 1996, shortly after bin Laden returned from the Sudan. He then fought in the Taliban's front lines, where he lost a leg in 1997. He was pulled out of the operational cell in Yemen after briefly being arrested by Yemeni authorities, then released. He continued to function as an external communications link between al-Nashiri and bin Laden in Afghanistan. There were other facilitators in Yemen, including Jamal al-Badawi. He rented apartments and bought the boat used in the attack. He fought in Bosnia in the 1990s, then went to Afghanistan and trained in Jihad Wal. He was based in Yemen when al-Qaeda decided to start planning for the USS Cole attack. 2 suicide operatives were initially selected for the operation. The Yemenis, Taha al-Abtal and Salman al-Adani. After the attack on the USS Sullivan's failed, they both died in unrelated events. Al-Adhal got killed on the front line in Afghanistan, and al-Adani drowned in an accident in Yemen. They were replaced by 2 other Yemenis, Hassan al-Kamiri and Ibrahim al-Thawar, aka Nibras. There are indications that at least 3 of the 4 operatives had fought in Bosnia in the mid-1990s. After the Bosnian War ended in 1995, Arab volunteers typically went home or sought out active front lines, such as ones in Tajikistan and Chechnya, or went to acquire training in Khost, Afghanistan. 4 suicide operatives appeared to have followed this pattern, eventually being recruited by bin Laden in Afghanistan in 1996 or later. One of the USS Cole bombers, al-Qamiri, had originally risen in al-Qaeda's ranks to become emir of al-Farouk in Khost at the time of the 1998 missile strikes. Another member of al-Nashiri's network is worth mentioning, Ahmed al-Darbi, a Saudi from Taif, became part of al-Nashiri's network after the USS Cole bombing. He was recruited in Saudi Arabia in 1996, went to the Chaldean camp to train, and after a 3-month basic course, he was selected to meet with bin Laden in Jalalabad. Bin Laden sent him for 2 to 3 months advanced training in Jahalwal in early of 1997. Afterward, he fought on the Taliban's front lines north of Kabul, served in bin Laden's bodyguard force, and worked as a trainer in al-Farouk camp while it was located outside Kabul. All these assignments were typical assignments for up-and-coming al-Qaeda's cadre. Sometime after the USS Cole attack in October of 2000, he started working for al-Nashiri personally. He was directly involved in organizing a plot to target oil tankers in the Straits of Hormuz. The USS Cole bombing was carried out by a new generation Saudi and Yemenite al-Qaeda members who were radicalized in the first half of the 1990s and joined al-Qaeda during 1996 or later. Al-Nashiri, leader of the plot, appeared to have been the most experienced of the lot, as he was among the oldest, 35 at the age of the bombing. He fought in Tajikistan at the very beginning of the Tajik Civil War in 1992-1993. The others got their first jihadist experience in Bosnia, and later in Afghanistan under the Taliban. In 1996 to 1998, Saudis and Yemenis who came to Afghanistan were actively targeted for recruitment by Osama bin Laden. The USS Cole attack was, in a sense, a result of this recruitment effort. The majority of operatives for the USS Cole attack were recruited and trained in Afghanistan, bin Laden's Jalalabad residence, and in al-Qaeda's training camps in Khost. According to one source, al-Qaeda's chief explosives expert, Abu Abd al-Rahman al-Mujahir, gave explosive training to al-Nashiri, the plot leader, while the latter was in Afghanistan. Al-Muhajir did not travel to Yemen to build the bomb, as he had done in the East Africa operation, presumably because he was wanted in the 1998 embassy bombings, and al-Qaeda did not want to risk his arrest. However, operatives involved in the USS Cole plot traveled freely between Yemen and Afghanistan on forged passports. After the USS Cole attack, there were no U.S. missile strikes in Afghanistan. U.S. authorities suspected that bin Laden was behind the attack, but were not able to prove it with certainty. Key members of al-Nashiri's network, including al-Nashiri and bin Attash, fled to Afghanistan prior to the attack, and only peripheral members were arrested in Yemen. According to the 9/11 Commission report, President Clinton decided to not carry out retaliatory strikes due to the lack of incriminating evidence against bin Laden. This evidence did not surface until after 2002. Key operatives, including al-Nashiri, were arrested and transferred to the U.S. detention facility in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. The lack of a U.S. response further increased the confidence of al-Qaeda, and in Afghanistan, bin Laden openly praised the USS Cole attack. 2 of al-Qaeda's guest houses in Kandahar were named after the suicide operatives. The Nibras guest house was the main point of entry for new recruits coming to Afghanistan to train in al-Farouk. The Hassan guest house was for trained fighters. February 2001, bin Laden recited a poem praising the U.S. Cole attack at the wedding of his son, Hamza. However, in line with al-Qaeda's covert strategy, he was careful not to claim direct responsibility for the attack. Again, Taliban saw no reason to question bin Laden about his role in either attack.